we are in a series on evangelism titled Just One More. It's taken out of that scene in John. I think it's around John 13, where Jesus is his last moment of public ministry. He's in the temple, and he's shouting at the top of his voice, just saying, just to reach one more. If you have faith in me, have faith in me. And it's a moving scene. And so we're in like 5 weeks here talking about what are the values that drive that kind of a heart that would want to reach just one more. And the first week we talked about how one of the values, the first value was people matter to God. Last week we talked about people need community. And this week we're going to talk about how people need cultural relevance. And it's taken from Mark Middleberg's book called Contagious Christianity. The themes the messages are ours or mine. I mean, you can go read the book and fact check that, but yeah, I know his book's way better than Scott's sermon. You'll see that. But if you're newer to our church, it's interesting. We're a part of a denomination called the Christian Missionary Alliance, and cultural relevance is kind of a thing. Christ gave us this mandate in Matthew chapter 28. I think it's up on the screen. It says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given me. Therefore, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe everything that I have commanded you. And lo, I like the King James Version, sorry. And lo, I am with you always, even to the ends of the earth. And so there's this mandate that's put on us, and Christ expects us to go. And what you see, and we'll start to talk about this later as we unpack the rest of the New Testament, is as the church went out, they went into different cultures, and the question started to rise, what does it look like to reach each culture? And our denomination was started by a guy named A.B. Simpson. His picture should be up on the screen. And this was back in the 1870s, 80s, somewhere around in there. And he was a pastor to a couple different churches. He was a Presbyterian pastor, went to one church, ended up leaving that and landed in Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, like right off of Times Square Church. You can go there and eat it's a pizzeria, but it's in the church building. And then they built a skyscraper over the church. It's kind of funny because you couldn't mess with the structure. It's a national historical site. So you can read about the CMA as you order your pizza. But anyway, he's down there, and he's at this Presbyterian church, and cultural relevant stuff was happening, right? Because he was listening to the music that was being played, the new music, the popular music at the time, and he's like, well, why don't we write music like that? Why are we doing such old-fashioned music? Which is funny. 1880s, and he's saying the music he's doing is old-fashioned. The old-fashioned music ended up becoming the sacred music of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, of which we could never get rid of because, well, it was sacred. Meanwhile, A.B. Simpson's back are going, I hate this music. Let's write something that is contemporary. And he has this phrase. He says, popular music is the heart of the people. So he starts to write new songs for worship and for the church, and the people don't really like it. Some do, some don't. But he's trying to be culturally relevant, so when somebody comes in, they're like, hey, I recognize that. I can sing to that. The other thing is immigrants were coming off the ship. And a lot of these people, some of them did speak English, some of them didn't speak English. Most of them were poor, most of them were broke, most of them were dirty, didn't have a place to live, didn't have a job, were just trying to survive. And he says, come on in to this prestigious church that he was a part of, where you rent pews, and because if you rent a pew, you get a little heater for your pew. And he didn't care who rented what pew. He's like, we're reaching people for Jesus. And people started to get mad. You can't bring all these people in. It's ruining everything. And he's like, what? Like, what did the Bible say? Reach everyone? And so he ended up leaving. He's like, I can't do this. We're called to reach people. And so he started reaching people, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and he ended up forming this alliance of Christians and missionaries because he just wanted to reach this world for Christ, just wanted to get one more. He wanted to do it in culturally relevant ways. And that's the legacy of our denomination. And that's how we got started. And then he never wanted the denomination. They started it, he basically said over my dead body, and once he died, they started the denomination. I've made it official, so it's kind of funny. He didn't feel like we needed another denomination. We just needed to reach the world for Jesus. There were enough Christians around. But I like the denomination. It works. So cultural relevance is a thing, and historically there's strong reactions on either side. And there's a guy named Richard Niebuhr. I think his book's up there. This guy is famous for writing this book, Christ of Culture, or Christ and Culture, and trying to articulate what are on the spectrum of culture and how a church should reach it, how do we understand who's doing what and what's historically happened over the years. And so he wrote this book. And he talks about there's certain Christians that are Christ and against culture, and there's certain Christians that go Christ of culture. And so we're going to talk about that spectrum. And so Christ against culture comes from James chapter 4, verse 4, all kinds of passages. But James chapter 4 is obviously one you're like, okay, yeah, I get that. It says, you adulterers and adulteresses, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? King James, sorry, I got to get the enmity in. Do not therefore love the world, right? Love not the world, neither thing in it. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. That is Awana training coming through, and that's cultural relevance. Some of you are like, Awana, what's that? I shouldn't even drop that. I'm just going to move on. Ask somebody who's old. Young. Christians have a call. So here's the thing. What happens is people look at that and go, Christ is against culture. You can't love culture, anything about culture, all that. You've got to get away from it. So what happened is the church historically would have these movements of renewal and saying, oh, the church has lost its way. And often what you would see is monasteries would start. Monastic movements would start. Pulling away from culture, getting away from the world, and they'd just be out there on their own. The Amish community, the Mennonite community. And they would create rules because you got to have rules if you're going to know how close you can get to culture without crossing the line. Does that make sense? And so you can only wear a couple different shades of colors if you're Amish, or a certain brand of Amish, or Mennonite. And because if you wore other clothes, like some of you are wearing, well, that's part of the world. And well, is it? Is it not? And the monastic movement was completely removed out of the world, inside walls, didn't get outside. And there's this whole thing that Christ is against culture. You can't do anything about culture. You just got to walk away from all of it. And meanwhile, the rest of the world is going, this is so bizarre. Like, how do you even do this? And the logic starts to break down. Well, why is this wrong and that's not wrong? And why is and so that's Christ against culture. Christ of culture on the other side of the spectrum, if you have this up here, Christ of culture comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, where Paul writes this. He actually says, he's talking about reaching people, right? And he says, look, though I'm free from all, I've made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. So to the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, that I might win those under the law. He's talking about he's not talking about the moral law of God. He's talking about the legalistic spiritual structures of religion. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, obviously, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I become all things to all people, so that by all means I might save some. And I do this all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in this blessing. So you have on this side this spectrum that says we're going to become all things to all people, so by all means we might save some. And what happens on this side is the church begins to abdicate truth. Paul has these exceptions in here. Look, I'm still under the law of Christ, but somewhere along the line, churches and Christians start to get away from the truth of God to just reach everyone, right? And so they'll reach this, and so what you see is over time, denominations start to move farther and farther away from the Word of God and the law of Christ, as Paul writes it. because we want to be inclusive. And so you see denominations like the United Methodist Church is a denomination, and the Presbyterian Church USA, and Methodists have splintered off, and there's conservative one, and Presbyterians have splintered off, and there's conservative ones that have left. But those denominations, I think it's a Presbyterian denomination just had a vote on whether sexual promiscuity is wrong, and they voted it wasn't, because they wanted to include everybody. So, you just kind of go, okay, we might have lost the plot a little bit. But that's what happens. And that's why people on Christ Against Culture are like, it's a slippery slope. You start getting here, and then there was a legalism. Many of us understand the legalism that probably happened in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where even in a lot of your Bible-believing churches, Baptist churches, things like that, you had all these rules, don't do this, don't do that, because we're scared and fearful of going all the way down to the other side. It's a tension. It's not easy. And so what we saw in the 60s and 70s was, what do we do with music, rock music, right? That was a big deal. And so in the middle here, Richard Niebuhr talks about this other idea, and it's the idea of Christ can transform culture. He can take what's in culture that's neither good nor bad, it just is, and he can redeem it and transform it. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like, is this keyboard evil? Well, no, it's not evil. Is the guitar evil? Well, no, the guitar is not evil. Is the bass guitar evil? No. Is the drums evil? No. Are tambourines? Possibly. Depends on the church. Depends on the setting. Now, there's nothing evil about any of this stuff. It's what someone does with it. And so if you saw that movie that came out recently, The Jesus Revolution, what happened is Calvary Church over in California, they're like, wait a minute, this stuff can be redeemed. Let's use it. And that started the worship wars. And we had this war between against culture and of culture, and people were saying, oh, no, this is capitulating. And now we're here. I don't know if you go back and you listen to the first Christian rock bands that were just so, scary back in the day, like Petra. And now you listen to a band like Petra, you're like, oh my goodness, this is like light rock. This is soft rock. This is like elevator music, right? It's just so, we've come so far. But what the church is now, most people are like, it's not even a thing. Why? Because Christ redeemed it. He redeemed it. And what's a struggle right now for some is lights, stage lights, and haze. Do we do haze or don't we do haze? No, because here's the thing. If somebody's coming, like you talk to some people who come out of just the heavy production rock culture, they're like, I don't want anything that even smells of that because it reminds me of all kinds of evil. But then other people are like, well, what's wrong with lights? And how do you capture light? The only way you capture light is it reflects off something. So that's why you need haze. But for a lot of the culture, even the church, we're wrestling with that because it just feels like you're at a rock concert. And for other people, they're like, what's the big deal? And so we're trying to figure out what's cultural relevance, even in the middle of it. That's one that's going on right now. And some of you are going, it's a thing? It's a thing. You got to figure it out. So I want to talk about where we are right now in these last few minutes that we have. What is going on in our culture? Because that's where we are right now in terms of the church in America. A lot of that, like the rock music and even just stage and production and all that and professionalism and all that, I think the church has kind of weeded through that. And it's just not people come in who don't know Christ and they're just like, oh, okay, it's not a thing anymore. But what's the thing? What's going on in the church that the church is really trying to wrestle with right now and actually will be wrestling with here in the coming years? And that has way more to do with the culture of our day and the philosophy of it. So this is really interesting. Barna Research, I was reading a book, this is a couple years ago. Craig Springer, he's the director, national director for Alpha, or was. I think there's a new guy there. But he wrote this book, and he partnered with Barna Research, which is a pretty large organization that does research and surveys and tries to figure out what culture, what's going on in culture, all this thing. So Barna Research, along with him in this book, they were talking about this. They researched millennials, and they found that millennials, I think for millennial Christians, right, 47% of millennial Christians believe that sharing your faith is morally wrong. Now just wait. 47% said it's wrong to share your faith. But 94% said that knowing Jesus was the best thing that could ever happen to them. Which is interesting. It's the best thing that could happen to anybody else in this world is knowing Jesus. And not only that, 75% believe that they were equipped to share about Jesus with somebody else. There is a cultural thing happening here. If you don't understand the broader culture, you won't understand why millennial Christians are saying, hey, something's wrong. Isn't that interesting? And Springer talks about this, and Barna Research talks about this. They're not saying it's wrong. They're saying it's wrong in terms of culture. They're saying methodology, not ideology. Does that make sense? How we go about it. And as they look at the past, they're saying, that's wrong. You can't do it that way. They're not saying don't do it. They're saying don't do it the way we've been doing it. It won't work in our culture. In fact, it becomes offensive the way we used to do it. When they're like, well, how do you do it? I'm glad you asked. We're trying to figure this thing out. The church is trying to figure it out in real time because it has changed. Church culture, American culture has changed so quick in the last 20 years. And what we're seeing is the emergence of a secular culture, almost full-fledged secular culture, but it's secular culture, kinda, is how I think I would probably put it. I've been reading this guy, How Not to Be Secular. It's a guy by James Smith, and it's a book about the book. I can't read that book because it's just so far over my head, but this is a book about that book, and you're like, well, what's that book? Well, that book is about secularism. But he boils down like 600 pages to something that's more manageable, but there's a glossary. I'm reading terms and things I don't even understand. But what's interesting as he looks at this, he says, look, what's happening right now in culture, in American culture specifically, has been happening, and it's actually been a process that's been over 400 years old, 500 years old probably. This didn't happen. The sexual revolution of the 60s did not happen overnight. It took almost 500 years to get there, which makes it almost impossible to irreverse it. It's going to be difficult. Because what comes out of that, he says, you have to study church history, you have to study the history of science, psychology, specifically sexuality. You have to study also technology and understand how all these things have interplayed to get to where we are right now. And it's fascinating because what they're saying is what happened in the 60s and what's happening now at an accelerated rate is finally the full expression of what's been building for these centuries. And it is a sexual and actually secular, and part of that comes to sexuality things, but it is a secular culture. So here's what it's like. But he says, in a sense, kinda. So if you look at our culture, and you'll find that there's probably about, I don't know if he's got a scientific survey or he's guessing, but he's quoting some other guys. So maybe there's a lot of accuracy to it. But he said, look, there is a fringe over here, probably somewhere. Let's just call it 8 to 10%, of people that are hardcore secularists. They don't believe in God at all. They're naturalists. And because they're naturalists, they're all deterministic, meaning that we just live in this world and there is no meaning. You just make meaning whatever you want to. But we're all just neutrons, protons, and that's it. And there is nothing bigger than that. It's atheism. And that's that 8 to 10. They're very ardent believers in that and supporters in that. He said, then you've got this other side over here that you would say, if you're talking about a Bible-believing segment of the population that still holds to biblical authority and still would do this on a Sunday morning. He says that's probably, 10%. He said then there's this 80% in the middle that's kind of secular-ish. They want what secularism promises, and what it promises is that they get to make their own they get to make their reality, right? They get to determine what truth is, and truth resides in them, and they like that. That's secularism. And now what's starting to happen is, everything was relative. Now everything is your truth, but now my truth, my truth is okay. And it's really essentially, if anyone comes with like biblical authority, that's evil. That's now evil. No, you can't tell me what to do. And there is, obviously, we can poke holes in all of it. It just is what it is. So the individual is the ultimate source of authority. The individual determines their identity. And in the history of the world, sexual identity is driving culture. It's never happened in any culture where literally sexual identity is driving the culture. And it's changing what a family looks like. It's changing what mom and dad looks like. And it's criminalizing anyone who would disagree. And we're seeing pushback, and we're in the middle of this ish. It's going there faster and accelerating faster. But what's inconsistent in this culture, and this is what's fascinating, is that there's still this reticence to give up the idea that there is some kind of spiritual power out there, that there is some kind of transcendent being out there. Even in this 80%, and that's why you'll hear in crisis people will start to talk about God. And they'll start to go to this, and they'll start to go to that, because they can't get rid of the idea that there is something supernatural. So they're secular, kinda. And if that, I think often what the church is doing is getting angry and saying, well, pick one. And they don't want to. And we can work with that, honestly. You don't have to point out the inconsistencies of it, just work with it. And I think so often the model, the method that happened out of the 60s and 70s is you got to be either or, right? It's either black or white. You either choose truth or you don't choose truth. And let me prove to you why these things are true. And right now that just doesn't work, and they don't care. They want both. And we just go, okay, well, we'll work with this side, and we'll work with that, and we'll figure it out. It's a fascinating place our culture is in. And the challenge for the church here in these next few moments, what's the challenge? And so I've been reading over the years, these last few years, looking at this and reading far greater minds than myself. And, I want to credit, Gordon Conwell Ministry, Biola University, Gospel Coalition, Barna, guys like this. I mean, there's a lot of people and books out there that are being read by philosophers. So I'm going to give you two challenges I think the church is facing that we've got to figure out how are we going to move into this and not be against it and not go all the way on the other side. And the first one is this. The culture right now is this. The Bible-based churches are becoming increasingly exiled from mainstream culture, which I think you guys are like, yeah, okay, that probably isn't surprising. Maybe this stuff is surprising. I don't know. Another way to say that really is, as society completely goes towards more and more secularization, Christianity must get private. They're going to force it into private expression. it's going to get removed from the public square. And people won't want to be seen coming into a church building. They won't want to be seen walking in. And that's going to start to happen. Already, people don't really want to come to a church building. The other piece of this, and this is part of it, is the distrust of the church as a whole. Catholic, Protestant, they don't care. It's all the same. And the church leadership. And why do you have the distrust? Well, just watch the news and see the latest moral failing. Watch the latest news of whatever church. We see that. And I would say it's both Protestant and Catholic. Like, all of us have, I would say in this isn't like pointing fingers at anybody. We have severe problems, and we're still, I think you guys probably saw that. What was it, like 2 years ago, Illinois, the Diocese of Illinois finally published their findings on the abuse that had happened. And I think everybody in the country is like, wait a minute, Boston did their thing like 30 years ago. Why did it take you 30 years to figure this out? And this slow rolling of immorality and broken trust, not only Catholic Church, but Protestant, it's just happening. It happens, and they don't trust the church. And so they don't want to come, and that's just culture. So what is our response? The church has experienced probably 300 years, 3 centuries of favor in our culture. It really has. And that favor is fast diminishing. And so the model that we did of church when you have favor was a attractional model. Build a building, center of town, everybody comes, because that's what we do. That's what Americans do. And then we built bigger churches, and we built fancy churches, and it was programs in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We learned how to build amazing buildings that didn't look like church buildings and do amazing services that were moving and powerful and used the arts and were excellent, done excellent. It wasn't no longer bless your heart kind of ministry. It was like, wow, and but people are not going to be attracted to church buildings and locations in a secularized culture. You just look at Europe and you can see it. And so what do? We have to start to shift from thinking attractional. If we just build it, they come. No, it doesn't happen anymore. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to become more and more what they like to use is this word incarnational. And incarnation is just a $100 word for what Jesus did. Jesus was God, became flesh, came and was face to face with us in relationship. So incarnational is no longer come to us, it's us going out to where they are. And where are they? Well, they're all around us. And it's going to be something that shifts to where our homes become something that becomes more of a tool of ministry. They will come into our homes long before they'll come into a building. And that's this trend. Is it all the way there? No. It's ish. It's somewhere here in the middle, kinda. But that's what we're looking at, and that's what people are forecasting here of where the church is going. We're going to have to start thinking about how our own relationships and our home and the homes of those around us become probably the first door people come through to meet Christ. The second challenge is this. We're in the golden age of social media. You all know this. It's an all-out obsession with it. People are wanting to get godlike status. Just watch this younger generation, the Gen Z generation. They're native to it, and they live for it. The social media, the posts and everything, and Instagram, and I don't know what the latest one is, but they're in it, right? Now we got AI on top of that, and AI is offering both community and it's offering advice. And so people are going to that for spiritual advice, going outside of what you would say is community. You do theology, doctrine together. And now it's just get AI. And that's not bad. AI is great. I use AI. And that's a question. Like if you put that up on the screen, do you use AI? Do you not use AI? And Christians are debating that. Should we be against it? Should we be in it? Like, there are Christians on either side of this that are writing, missiles against each other, or missives, I guess is what you would probably say. Here's the thing, the restraints on morality are gone. They're lifted. And so with that, I think is obviously, this is not news to you because you guys see it. You can have as much violence and sexuality as you want right here. Unrestrained, you can see you can see the most vile things you ever want to see right on your phone. You don't have to leave your home. And that is unraveling our culture, and it's unraveling lives. And the final thing about this is interesting. Gen Z, on record, is the most secularized generation in American history, the least churched generation in our history. What's interesting is that college campuses in every state, there are Christian organizations that are on there, are reporting that their classes, people are coming to their ministries, people are coming to their events, like students, like some of these places are talking about, we are seeing attendance like we've never seen before in our lives. And kids are coming in, students are coming in, and they're looking for something. Because they're the first generation that's grown up in a secular culture, and they're saying there's got to be more. Unfortunately, the tide is not great enough yet to stop the decline of Christianity, but it shows something. So here's where the millennials and their methodology comes in. It's this: we don't go and lead anymore. Our lead conversations aren't with 10 proofs that the Bible is right. We don't do that. Like it's just going to come at people and they're just going to be like, eh. We don't do really crusades anymore. We just were part of one with the Billy Graham, his grandson who did one. We hardly saw any non-Christians come. It's not the culture. That's just not our culture. They're not going to, it's not come, build something, offer something great, and they'll come. They won't. They don't. So we're not going to do those things. What's interesting, I think, as you look at what's happening with these college campuses, is we're going to offer what this world can't offer. And we're not going to come in and do self-help. We're not doing self-help. We're not doing motivational speaking. We're not doing big production stuff. Because they look at that stuff and go, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I got that. I can get that feed anytime I want. So what do we offer? We offer the power of the presence of God and the power of his word. And we give them something that they are not hearing. Come and die. Come and sacrifice and submit and find real living. They are not hearing that. And we know that is the key that will change their life. And that's what these students, these college students are like. Would you raise the bar for me? They're wanting someone to come along and say, no participation trophies here. Like, we don't do that. Come and die to yourself that you might live for Christ. And they're like, where has this been? And then they find out what this word has power. And so we don't have to move away from the word of God. And you're thinking, well, how much are we changing? Well, we're just changing some of the methodology, but we're just saying in relationship now, because it has to be incarnational and it's you, and it's got to be there. And here's the other piece of this thing, and this is, I think Rob Reamer was right, and other leaders are talking about this. The more we understand soul care, the more we'll reach this generation. Because they're so messed up and they're so broken. And if 50% of our society has been molested sexually, 50%, 60 for women, 45% from men. So you do the math. People have wrecked childhoods, and they don't know what to do with it. And add on to that everything else. They don't know how to get over this stuff. And I'm telling you, when we understand the soul and can say, we can come alongside people and just go, how are you doing? And that's what we do. We don't have to have 10 proofs. How are you doing? How are you even managing that kind of pain? How are you even getting over that? And if they're struggling with identity, I get that. How do you even know that identity, how does that hold you together? How do you just start asking questions? Digging deep. And then you just say, hey, I know a God. Would you want to study the Word? I know a God. You want to pray? Let me just pray over you. You can ask somebody if they're looking like they're full of anxiety. You look full of anxiety. Why are you so anxious? And they'll tell you, hey, can I pray for you? What friend is going to turn down prayer? Nobody does. And you go, I know a God that actually, well, he says you don't have to be anxious because I can be here with you. Incarnational. You in front of others. Now, are we going to stop? Is it perfect? And we're not going to stop gathering. We're not going to stop gathering. We're not going to stop inviting people. But I'm telling you, it is trending that way. And we need to have our minds ready for that. Does that make sense? We have to be ready to go, oh my goodness, there may be a day that comes where we're doing outreach that's in homes. And we're actually talking about doing alpha in homes, actually in the spring. Because we've heard people say, oh, I thought I'd get struck by lightning if I came into church. I can't tell you how many times I hear that from people. They just don't feel like they can walk through these 4 doors or on this campus. It's practical, it's pragmatic. But at the end of the day, I think if we watch this and you guys know, you guys are seeing this come, we're all seeing this coming, and we're seeing the church getting pushed further and further away from culture and the criminalization of our faith. Folks, we don't have to worry. Like, we just don't. Like, you might get mad, you might get ticked, you might worry, but at the end of the day, we're going to actually start joining a lot of the church around the world. And the church thrives in persecution. It does. The church doesn't die in persecution. The church thrives in persecution. It's the craziest thing. Go ask Chairman Ping why he can't exterminate Christians. The church thrives. So I don't want you to sit here and go, oh man, this is so bad. It's like, no. Christ said we'd have persecution. Christ said this world will be against me. So we're going to use whatever we can in culture and leverage it for the King.